rioters. On Thursday, the House's January 6th committee unveiled startling new evidence. Take a look.
There has to be some way we can maintain the sense that people have that there's some security or some confidence that government can function and that we can elect the President of the United States.
Well, for more, let's speak to our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Doug, your reaction?
Well, look, I mean, that's Speaker of the House. You would never know from watching that this was at a moment when Nancy Pelosi was literally, hunkered down in a secure location in a Capitol that was under siege from an insurrectionist mob that had been incited to march there by Donald Trump. What she's essentially doing is she had been furiously trying to phone up governors, national security officials, begging them to call out the National Guard. She was there with Chuck Schumer, her counterpart in the House as well, trying to also get people to tell Trump to call off this assault, the assault of his own followers, something that was never really done. Her main concern was less about her own personal safety than about trying to make sure that the process, the democratic process of transition of power, in this case it was the day of the certification of the results of the election, got done. She didn't know whether it would be possible to do it that day for security reasons, and they'd have to actually postpone it, or whether it would be possible to get all the members of Congress back in that room. But we saw her there trying to make sure that the democratic certification of the election went forward. And this in a day, let's remember, where the committee, in the ninth and perhaps final presentation that it's running out of time, basically had a sweeping summation of its case, placing Donald Trump front and center in numerous efforts to try to overturn the results of the 2020 election. They argued, and they showed evidence arguing, that Donald Trump had a premeditated plan to announce victory even if, and claiming that the election was stolen, regardless of the results. So it's quite an incredible sort of sequence of events. The committee showed evidence showing that Donald Trump was essentially furious and enraged and embarrassed by the fact that he lost the election. And yes, previous testimony showed that he knew, he had been told he had lost the election. But he was so bent on his premeditated plan to claim that the election had been stolen, to instigate his followers, he sought to join that mob before it marched. The Secret Service ended up stopping him from joining that mob. But he wanted to join them, knowing, according to the evidence presented to this committee, knowing that armed mob was armed and threatening violence. So an amalgam of testimony that adds up to a pretty damning indictment of a sitting president that knew ahead of time, before one single vote was cast, that he was not going to accept the outcome in the event that he lost. And if he did lose, he was going to claim the election was stolen.
And so now he's been summoned. Will Donald Trump testify? Will the subpoena lead to anything?
Exceedingly unlikely. Look, this is a House that's already living on borrowed time, right? We have next month, we have the midterm elections in the U.S. in which the Republicans are favored to retake control of the House which has been holding these hearings. What will they do when they retake the House? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know. They will disband the January 6th committee and effectively thereby also disband any effort to hold anyone to account for the events of January 6th. Remember, there is an entire parallel universe in America who believe that these hearings are fraudulent, they're hoaxes, they're absurd, they're ridiculous, they never should have been held. So you have two Americas, one tuning into these hearings, believing that they were some of the most vital hearings Congress has ever held, and the other saying no. Donald Trump has never cooperated with this committee. He's barely recognized it. He doesn't even claim to have watched their presentations. He is exceedingly unlikely, as I said, to testify. He has hinted that maybe he could come, but it would have to be a live testimony. He doesn't want it pre-recorded and then excerpt shown. It would have to be live. That's not going to happen either. Remember, we're about to have the House perhaps go back into the hands of Republicans, a Republican Party that is mostly beholden still to their champion, Donald Trump, and his election lies and his claims of a stolen 2020 election.
All right, Doug, thank you very much. Douglas Herbert, our international affairs commentator.